coming up on this week's episode.
And then God, as he does, decided he'd turn that on its ear, and he spoke to me really clearly just before COVID. Interesting time to say this, it was. And so God spoke to me and said, 1 million churches.
Hello and welcome to the Transformation Podcast with Metamorphic. My name's Jordan and I'll be your host as we interview team members and special guests to be inspired and empowered to bring transformation wherever we are. You can head to our website metamorphic.global for more resources and opportunities to bring transformation around the world. Welcome to the Metamorphic Zone, where we laugh at the impossible and then do it. Hello and welcome to the Transformation Podcast. So today we're going to be talking about 1 million churches with our founder and CEO, the founder and CEO of Metamorphic, Lindsay Clarke. So it's great to have you back on the podcast, Lindsay. I want to begin by asking you, how did this goal of 1 million churches come about?
Thanks, Jordan. Yeah, love to talk about the 1 million church goal or dream that we have today and how we started with that, because it was an interesting thing. I think we said in a previous podcast, our original vision was to plant 1,000 churches. And most people thought that was a crazy idea back then. Not too many people believed we could achieve it. But of course, 2.5 years later, we did. And now those people think we can plant many, many more churches. And then we developed a vision to be the largest, most influential church planting movement in history. And we were just going along our merry way, trying to plant as many churches as we could, making sure they were doing a fantastic job and really being a blessing in their community. And then God, as he does, decided he'd turn that on its ear, and he spoke to me really clearly just before COVID. Interesting time to say this, it was. And so God spoke to me and said, 1 million churches. Didn't say a lot about it. He just said 1 million churches. And I gathered what he was saying is we need to plant 1 million churches. And so I sat on that for a while because I really didn't think it was going to be a smart thing to start wandering around and doing podcasts talking about planting 1 million churches when at that stage we hadn't even planted 8,000. So, I'm thinking this is going to sound just as wacky as the original dream of 1,000. So anyway, I sat on it for a little while, for a few weeks, and then I began to talk to the Metamorphic team about it. And I said back then, let's not probably run around shouting this from the rooftops just yet, but this is what I believe God's saying. And I was basically framing it so they could engage with the idea and get used to the idea before we began to think about how we could make this happen. And so that was about November. And then we got to February. I was in Europe, in the nation of Hungary, training some people there, and COVID hit. And so I jumped on a plane, raced back to Australia, and I was speaking at the last event I was going to speak at before all the borders in Australia shut down. And I was speaking to some business people in Sydney. And just as I finished talking, and I'd not mentioned 1 million churches, we didn't have the T-shirt, we didn't even have a logo for it. It was just an idea, but a God-breathed idea. And at the end of that meeting, God speaks to me as I'm just about to pray and says, tell them about the 1 million churches. And I don't know if you've ever had this happen, Jordan, or any of the viewers have ever had this happen, but as I'm talking to the congregation and about to pray, I'm also having a conversation with God, and I'm basically saying, go away, leave me alone. I don't want to say this. I'm not quite ready for this yet. But he kept pressing me. And so I said, as I closed the meeting, I said, and just so you know where we're heading next at Metamorphic, we believe that God has said we should plant 1 million churches. And so it was the first declaration of it. And as we declared that, I felt faith rise in the room. It was amazing. And not long after that, one of the people that had been in the room actually came and saw me and said, you know what, if you're going to plant 1 million churches, I want to give $1 million towards that. And so over a period of time, he's investing that money into church planting, which is pretty amazing. So that was how it happened at the beginning. And then from there, we just began to start to dream and think about how we might actually be able to achieve this. Because when he first said it to me, I'm sitting there going, 1 million churches. I don't even know where to start. So, but now we have some idea.
Yeah. Wow. How has the progress been so far? Where are we at right now towards 1 million churches?
Well, I think at the moment we're at 8,681 churches. Now that's what we call first generation churches. So that's the churches that we have personally, our team, have trained, mentored them. And that mentoring process, so it's not just coming to a seminar, but they come along to the boot camp. They are then mentored for another 2 years. So all 8,681 churches have gone through that. But on average, they've planted 4.2 churches each. So if we do the mathematics on that, it's pushing towards 40,000 churches. So when you start to think about that and the momentum we currently have, 1,000,000 churches, to be honest with you, is easier for me to believe for than the original 1,000, because we've already seen God do a miracle. I mean, we didn't get to 1,000 churches because I'm clever. We didn't get to 1,000 churches because I'm gifted. We got to 1,000 churches because Jesus is building his church. And this is the truth with 1,000,000 churches as well. I'm not smart enough to work this out. All I can do is respond to what God says. And if God says it, he will make it happen. And I do believe he's building his church. And so I know this is not a question you asked, but I often say this, and I think it's so true. And that is, a lot of people look at what we do at Metamorphic and say, "Oh, wow, that's amazing. Why are you doing that? Not, it's not something else." And I think, well, we're quite clever at Metamorphic. The only cleverness we have is that we know that if we do some other sort of ministry, we've got to do the work. But when it comes to planting churches, the Bible's pretty clear. He is building his church, and the gates of hell will not prevail against it. So all we have to do is turn up, train church planters, mentor them, love them, care for them, guide them, direct them, disciple them. And God is doing what he said he'd do, and that is he's building his church. So we have the foolproof mission strategy and the foolproof ministry.
It's a good one to be involved in. Has anything changed since getting that goal from God of 1,000,000 churches? Has anything changed about the way that you're going about things?
Yeah, I think there's been a number of changes. One is clearly with a team of 10 to 20 people, we can't plant 1,000,000 churches. So we've had to reorganize and think about what we do. One of the things we've always been good at Metamorphic is scale and sustainability. So we've always been able to scale. You don't plant 8,600 plus churches and turn them into 40,000 without having some idea of scale. And we also know how to do things sustainably, because those churches are all self-supportive. They don't rely on us at all. So we already had that as a strength. But again, to scale to 1,000,000 churches is a different challenge. And so what we realized was that many of the church planters that we have already discipled and mentored have become brilliant in themselves. And when I say brilliant church planters, to the point where they're planting. I talked about Pastor Kun in a previous podcast. He's planted more than 130 churches. So letting someone like Pastor Kun loose to train more church planters instead of him just sending them to us is one of the key strategies. So one of the things we've done is we've set up a thing called Meta Church. Now, the goal at Meta Church is to create a secondary leadership team of 1,000 people. So this is 1,000 hand-picked church planters that have already been through our program. They love Metamorphic. They're already connected with us. They're leaning in. They come to everything that we put on. And so what we're now doing is discipling and mentoring them, empowering them, because the model is an empowerment model, so that they can run their own church planting programs. And so we launched that this year in 2023. And just in Uganda alone, we've already run 5 of those. That's 100 new churches from people that are in that next tier. So as we grow that across the globe, we'll start to not be talking about thousands of churches in a year, but tens of thousands of churches in 1 year. And so that's the way we're heading. The other probably big change has been to decentralize what we do somewhat. Previously, we had team members all over the world, but we were still very Australia-centric in terms of the leadership and direction of that. Now we have a truly global team, and people from every continent are actually involved with making decisions, driving things forward. And I think our team no longer think so small in terms of geography. They don't just think about their region, but they think globally. And I think that global perspective at a team level is making a massive difference as we move towards planting 1 million churches.
So when we think of 1 million churches, can you share one or two stories with me of churches that have been planted, or stories from church planters, so we have an idea of what it means that there'll be 1 million of these churches?
Absolutely. So all of our churches typically are doing amazing things in their communities. So I used the example of Pastor Kun before, and I'll use that example again, and then maybe give you a different one of a lady in Africa who's doing something significant. But Pastor Kun has planted 130 churches. Now, on average, those churches are 150 plus. So we're not talking about cell groups. We're talking about churches that are autonomous. They have a pastor. They take up offerings. They have their own worship service. So they're not branch churches. They're actually autonomous churches. But they work together cooperatively. And what they do is, for example, that group of churches, not just Pastor Kun's church, but his network, they run a program called SWASHI, which is in the schools. And what that simply means, it's just school water and sanitation and hygiene education. And what they do is they partner with us. We raise some of the resources, but they raise the remainder. And they build latrines in schools. And when they do that, it's solving a whole lot of problems in the community, because typically the regional schools don't have toilets. So little kids have to go out in the bush, and that is not hygienic, but it's also dangerous too. And so there's a whole lot of things that can go wrong in that scenario. So they're solving that problem by partnering with schools. And so they've done that in now, I think it's 36 schools in their province, and they're going to keep going until they cover every school. So that's just one example. Now, when they do that, they also introduce a 1-year curriculum to teach on sanitation and hygiene, which means they build relationship and rapport in the school, and then the kids go home and teach their parents. So the multiplication of that is quite significant. And the end result has been many of those principals of schools have now become Christians and go to church, a lot of the teachers, and the majority of the kids do as well. They end up coming to Sunday school. So that's been very effective. But in his area there, they also dig wells. They've done biogas projects. They build roads. They build bridges. They've actually started a school which is getting average results in year 12 that are 15% above the national average. So these churches, when you look at them, the last statistic they're going to give you is how many people come to church on a Sunday. What they'll give you is the impact that they're having in the community. And I think that's the measure and an example of what a metamorphic style church looks like. Just need to add to that, we don't actually have metamorphic churches as such. What we do is we serve other movements, other denominations to help them plant churches. But they all buy into the metamorphic DNA, which is to impact the community. Another story, different, and I'll make this one a little bit shorter, is of a lady named Winnie, and I'm sure one of our other people that you'll interview will probably talk about Winnie, so I'll give you the abbreviated version. But it's an example again, and I want to use a woman as an example because we find that women are fantastic church planters. And so right across the board, we've got church planters that are 20 years of age through to 60 or 65. We've got church planters that are male or female. And the reality is anyone that's got a heart from God and a call from God can do something significant. Well, Winnie, I think it was back in about 2017, came to our church planting program. She was an ex-Muslim. She'd been converted to Christ, decided she wanted to start a church. She went back and planted a church, and over a period of between then and now, which is 6 years, she planted, I think it was 46 or 47 churches, close to 50 churches. She's seen 1,500 Muslims give their lives to Jesus. But, you know, that's fantastic. but it's the other stuff that she does. She runs a little thing in the community, or it's not a little thing, it's a big thing now, where she teaches people how to make bags and things like this so that they can create their own income. And so she's working on income creation for the communities that she's working in. And in the middle of that, she's been persecuted heavily. She had people try and throw acid on her, people try and kidnap her. All sorts of terrible things have happened. But she keeps marching towards the prize, and that is to plant fantastic churches that transform communities. And the proof in the pudding with this, for me, is when two local politicians who are part of the federal system in Uganda come to the Metamorphic training, two men that are Muslims, and they ask to talk to the leaders of Metamorphic. And all they want to say is to say thank you for sending Winnie into their communities because she's transforming them. And I think that's a great testament to the types of people that we have at Metamorphic. So we're not taking a whole lot of credit for that. We are the empowerers, we're the facilitators. The real heroes are the church planters. And right about now we have 8,681 hero stories. But soon there will be 1 million hero stories as together we transform this world in Jesus' name.
When you look forward to 1 million churches, what are you most excited about?
What I'm most excited about is that with a platform or a foundation of 1 million churches, it's the goal after that, because that can turn into something bigger again. But I'm excited by the fact that 1 million churches is a significant footprint across the globe. And I think there's many benefits. One is these churches are all kingdom churches, so they have an outward focus. So they have great relationships. So they're not a danger. They're not a danger to people from other creeds or backgrounds. They work very closely and with all sorts of people from different backgrounds. And so I think that is a great foundation. But I also think about the logistics of this and just some of the things that we'll be able to do. I mean, if you just imagine 1 million churches with an average of 200 people in each church, it's 200 million people. And if we wanted to pray for something, we could simply, by sending a text message, hit 200 million people in one moment. With that sort of movement, we can change the future of what happens on earth. And so it's not about us controlling things, but it's about us being able to facilitate things and for us to be able to bring godly expression into every community around the globe. So they're the two things. I look at it and I think at a practical level, we can press a button and reach that many people. But on a local level, I just think if you've got 1 million churches, that can in a moment, in a heartbeat, turn into 10 million churches. So that excites me.
Yeah, no, it's so exciting, like the exponential curve. And we're at a place where we can already see it beginning with Meta Church and things like this.
Yeah. Probably, if I can add one more thing, sorry,
go for it.
Probably the other thing, which is very important, and probably the most important thing to me personally, is that also means that there's 1 million people that have been empowered. And although we have a big goal of 1 million churches, it still comes down to the one. And so it's being in a class with 20 or 30 church planters, which I still love to do now. And I go there and I don't like to travel. I'm on an airplane thinking, why am I doing this? I'm getting too old for this. And as soon as I get there in the room with those 20 or 30 people, and I think about every person in that room as an individual, I know it's all worthwhile. And that's the other thing, is to actually go, you know what? We've had a hand. We're not the only people, and obviously God's in the midst of this, but we've had a hand in helping 1 million people become the best version of themselves so that they can transform their world. So that excites me too.
Yeah, no, it's so exciting. In the last podcast, you mentioned partnership, how everyone involved is a church planter. So for our listeners today, how can they play their part in planting 1 million churches?
Yeah, it's a great question, because we don't talk about donors, we talk about partners. And we do that very deliberately because we have a membership, of course, where people that maybe just want to connect with Metamorphic. I think our memberships they're not very expensive. We're talking about $60. It's just that's just buying into the vision and saying, I want to know more. So people can do that on our website at www.metamorphic.global, and they can become a member. But there's different levels of membership and partnership as well. And so I'll give you an example. We have an archetype, and this guy's name's Carl. And Carl's a mortgage broker. He's got 2 children and he's married and he's in his 50s. And Carl has been a Christian since he was a teen. And he lives in a Western nation and he's always wanted to plant a church, to evangelize. The gospel's always been important to him. As a 20-year-old at university, he imagined that's what he'd do. But of course, he got busy in business and got busy with family. And then you wake up one day in your 30, 40, 50, and you think, oh, that dream I had to see the world transformed through the gospel, it seems to have sort of gone past me. But you see, Carl discovered that he can be a church planter. And so he actually invests into a certain amount, I won't say how many, church plants each year. At Metamorphic, it costs us about $3,000 to plant one church. But those churches typically will result in 137 people giving their lives to Jesus in the first 2 years. So Carl and his family get together and pray, and they send their resource. And here's the thing, he is a hero. His family they're all heroes, and they are church planters because if without their resource, that church would not get planted, or the many churches that they're planting today. They started off doing one. Today, they can't help themselves. They want to do more. Every year, they're increasing it and looking for ways to partner. So that's one way. And it doesn't have to be a whole church. It could be just investing into part of a church. And we're not talking about investing into buildings, by the way. We're not talking about investing into structures. We're talking about investing into people, and people multiply. So the return on investment in this case, and this is for business people when I say this, but everyone might appreciate this, is when you break it down, it's actually $20 per soul. And so I look at that and I think, you know what? If I invest $20, I can see one person saved. If I invest 100, it's 5. I invest 3,000 and I planted a church and I saw 137 people give their lives to Jesus. So that's one way. Prayer is another way. People can partner with us in prayer and so forth, but also volunteering to help with different things. You can imagine to run a ministry like this requires a lot of admin, a lot of creativity, a lot of structural ideas, a lot of expertise, legal expertise, marketing expertise. And so there are so many opportunities for people to get engaged and involved. So the basic areas are resourcing what happens through partnership, prayer, and also volunteering to be a part of what we're doing. So, and of course, there is the fourth one is spreading the word about what Metamorphic does, being an advocate and telling other people.
It's brilliant. Yeah, you can share this podcast as well, get it out there, and have more people hearing about the goal of 1 million churches that we can plant together. So, Lindsay, thank you so much for being on the podcast. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Transformation Podcast with Metamorphic. Make sure to head to our website, metamorphic.global, where you'll find resources to empower you, as well as opportunities through partnership to bring transformation to the world. Follow us on social media. All the links will be down below in the show notes. Thank you for listening.